Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the live Q&A. There are more people to join. I've had loads and loads of questions directly into my Instagram. So I have a few to start with anyway. I have enabled the chat so you can either ask your question directly or you can pop a question in the chat box and I will answer any questions that come in. My name is Katie Mugan. I am the founder of nursingmama.ie. I am a mom of four. And I've breastfed and I've used bottles and formula on some. And I've had very different breastfeeding journeys. And I suppose that's made me very passionate about infant feeding. I am also a nurse by profession. I am a registered general, paediatric, and a public health nurse, and an infant feeding specialist and an IBCLC, so an international board certified lactation consultant. And I have been working in this field in Nursing Mama for the last, I think, since 2019. And I've been working, I suppose, with mothers and infants over the last greater than 20 years. So I have a lot of experience. I've worked both in the hospital and the community setting. I've worked both in the home environment as well, supporting parents as a maternity nurse. And I've done a lot of infant feeding and support with parents. I'm very well aware that it's a very emotive topic, whether we're breastfeeding, combination feeding, formula feeding, and it can lead to a lot of struggles, a lot of parents feeling overwhelmed. And I suppose that's where my business has really taken, I suppose, it started with kind of supporting parents in that instance. I have worked a lot in the last few years to, I suppose, create courses and information to allow parents to access information that is research-based, it's evidence-led, and it can help support you along your journey. I'm going to answer any questions that you come in. So even if you're listening in now, you can pop in some questions and I will do my best to answer as many as I can within the 45 minutes. I have some questions to start anyway that I'm going to go through. So whether you're breastfeeding, bottle feeding, formula feeding, combination, exclusive pumping, or you want to ask a question about general newborn care, please feel free to pop anything in and I will do my best to answer it. I know myself that my very first breastfeeding journey, my eldest is 14, and it was probably the easiest journey I had in comparison to any of the others. He taught me how to breastfeed. And I will say that he fed every 3 hours and he suddenly slept probably 5 or 6 hours from the very beginning, about 6 weeks old. He was not textbook. He was, I would say, it went against a lot of the rules that we talk about with breastfeeding. My second, I just assumed would be so easy and it would follow the same, pattern. And she was not that way at all. She was a small, frequent feeder, and we had many struggles with her with regards to breastfeeding. And I did move over to bottles, probably around 4 or 5 months, way sooner than I would ever have anticipated, because I thought it might be easier. And she was very refluxy. We had a lot of issues, but she was just as bad on the bottle as she was on the breast. And I think it was down to probably lack of confidence, lack of education that led me down that route. And then my third was very like my first, and very easy breastfeeding journey. But I had huge issues with this guy when we were trying to integrate a bottle into our feeding, and when I was trying to wean him off the breast. So I fed him up until 1, and at that point I tried to wean and I struggled so badly. I asked family, I asked my doctor, I asked colleagues about trying to wean, and all I got was just leave him and look, he'll cry it out for a few days and all will be fine. And I knew that was not going to work for us. I knew it would be detrimental to his health as well. He was a very sensitive little soul and I knew it just wouldn't work. So I researched, I educated, and I found strategies very simple that can help wean in a very gentle manner. And I created a weaning from breastfeeding course. I was one of the first lactation consultants here in Ireland to create this course, and it's been very popular since. And I've had many mothers that have weaned in a very gentle manner, in a very positive way. So it's not all about the early days, it's about the whole duration of a breastfeeding journey and making it as positive as possible for both mother and infant. And then I suppose bottle feeding is a huge part of it as well. In my nursing career, I've worked with many parents with bottle feeding issues. I've had over the last few years more and more bottle aversion clients. And yeah, I've helped parents across the whole spectrum of infant feeding. So I'm here to answer all your questions today. Some of them have come in, which is great. And I'm going to answer them. And I have a few others that have come in as well that I'm going to answer as well. So Claire has asked, Hi Katie, thanks for all your help. If it's okay to have two questions, you can have as many as you want. My nearly 3-month-old exclusively breastfed, difficult at the beginning due to low supply, had to triple feed for 3 weeks, has just started sleeping longer stretches at night. Should I pump during these long stretches or will my body regulate supply? Okay, so this is a tough one, to be honest. Our supply needs regular stimulation in order to maintain what we have. Now, if it is the case where your baby is gaining very, very well, so gaining really well, that it's not just kind of hitting the 150 grams per week, we're in excess of that, then your baby may be able to do a longer stretch in the night period, which will allow for the supply to drop, because if it's not required, that's what we want it to do. And it should maintain on the other feeds. However, for some mothers, their babies do need to be woken for feeds. Now, they might go a little bit longer. Instead of feeding maybe 2 to 3 hourly, they might go 4 to 5. But if you're talking about a 7, 8, or 9 hour stretch, for many mothers, that could be missing 2 feeds, which will have an impact on the supply that will drop, and it can impact other feeds within the 24-hour period. Now, how do we know, can your baby do without, or can another mom's baby do without? It is kind of very specific to the individual mother and baby. And I know that's a really hard thing to say, because I saw a mom today whose baby was gaining very, very rapidly. And this baby was only feeding one breast per feed and then was taking this big stretch off. And this baby was only 4 or 5 weeks old. But this baby was gaining exceptionally well. This mom had way too much. So in this instance, yes, the supply will come down and the overall supply will come down very well, and it'll probably even things out. If you're just meeting the needs of the infant and we take away feeds, then you could be at a loss. It really depends on how the baby's feeding. And I would expect that if we take a feed out during that, like maybe night period, that they're making up for it at other stages. So you might see there's an increase in maybe a feed before the evening time, and they'll go that 4 or 5 hour stretch, and they'll maintain it very well. And that's okay. I would just keep an eye on how supply manages. So if they're going, sometimes what I would do is that if I'm anyways concerned, I might just start with letting the baby sleep longer, see what their pattern is starting to show. So are they going from, instead of 2 to 3 hourly, they're suddenly doing 5 to 6 hours. And I would pump in exchange just to see, maybe for a few days or a week, to see are they still continuing to do that. And if they are, and they're maintaining weights, then I leave them be. I will let them see how they manage. And if they drop a feed, great, happy days, enjoy that longer sleep. If they are just bordering at making their weights, then I'm always a little bit more skeptical about dropping feeds here, because when you take away one feed, it doesn't just impact that one feed that we're removing, and it impacts the overall 24-hour supply, and it will come down. So it very much depends. A lot of the time in the early days and weeks, we can have our supplies not coming in the way we'd expect, but with what you did was triple feeding, extra stimulation, baby led the way, and actually increased supply, and you could have ended up in a little bit of excess. So like, just because you had a lower milk supply at the start doesn't mean that you are still only bordering at a lower, like meeting the need of the infant. You could have created more. It's all balanced back out. We take away that feed and you'll still maintain it, and baby's feeding really well. So I mean, yes, your body, if we're not using the milk, the body should absorb it, and your supply is told to reduce down because it's not required. But we just need to make sure that baby's feeding really frequently during the day to compensate for that. And I suppose just remember that milk supply is, I suppose our prolactin levels are highest between 12 and 5. So we would expect, like when you take a feed away from at that point or any time in that stage, that can impact supply a little bit greater than if we took a feed away earlier in the day. So I suppose it is about watching and seeing how you respond, and it is individual to the every mother is different and unique. At what point is the supply meant to settle? I wake up very tender, painful breast and pretty much leak most of the day. Okay, so that sounds like you actually have quite a big milk supply. If you were struggling when getting to the next feed and you were bursting, then you sound like you're in excess. Now, when we leave milk left sitting in the breast, supply is told to slow production and it will regulate. So this is where your baby may very well be able to do a longer stretch at night. And if you wake, I suppose if your baby was going only 4 hours and now they're going 5, 6, you might wake up at 4 hours and go, oh my God, I'm bursting. So what do? Hand express a little off for comfort, but not to empty. So if we empty the breast, we replenish. replenish. What we want to do is just hand express a little off for comfort. So just so you're not bursting or engorged, but you are full. So when we have a fuller breast, we're telling supply to slow it down, but there's always a fine line with being too full and lead to potential mastitis. And just taking that little bit off for comfort, so it gets you to the next feed. So for example, tonight you might wake at 4 and you go, God, I'm really full. Baby's sound asleep. Okay, I'll just take a little bit off. The next night you might get to 20 past 4. The next time you get to 5. The next time you get to 6. And before you know it, you can get to the same timing as what your baby's doing. And that will tell you that your supply is regulating. It just takes a little bit of time for supply to react to the drop in demand, but it will definitely settle. So like I said, you're one of the moms that with a little bit of extra stimulation, triple feeding, their supply came right up and it's balanced back out. Sometimes we can end up in excess because we've overstimulated the milk production cycle. And now we're kind of trying to tell it, actually, we don't need that much, so taper it back down again. So supply will react, increase or decrease, but just takes a little bit of time for our bodies to react to that drop. And we just need to be cautious, because this might be where when a baby suddenly does a longer stretch at night, puts you at risk of engorgement and potential mastitis if we leave a lot of milk left sitting in that breast, which is naturally had been naturally removed by the infant. Another thing to think about is just if you wake up and you're really full, hand express it off and just move that breast around, up, down, over and back, so the just milk is moving within the breast, but we're not stimulating it as in removing it from the breast. So it's just to keep it moving, and just take the edge off, but not to go wild. That can help. Okay, let's see what we've got. Sorry, I'm just going to move that over so I can just see a little bit easier on the questions. Okay, Laura has asked, newborn baby, breastfeeding at the moment, wondering should I get electric pump or normal pump? I'm finding it hard. Okay, so the pump isn't always a negative thing. I know we hear a lot about don't bring in the pump before 6 weeks, but the pump can save a mother's breastfeeding journey. Sometimes the baby's feeding can be a bit prolonged in the early days. They're learning this skill. So are you, and it takes time for you to learn the skill. It's a bit like learning to drive a car. At the beginning, we're thinking, okay, foot in the clutch, move the pedal. Everything feels overwhelming because you're thinking about it nonstop. When you think of breastfeeding, in the early days, you're the exact same. But after a while, once you learn the skill of driving, you can hop in the car, drive down to the shop, sing to a tune. You don't even realize what your hands and feet are doing because it's a natural learned experience. That's the same thing with breastfeeding. So in the early days, it can be all consuming. It can be overwhelming. And sometimes the pump can be your best friend. Now, if there is, generally speaking, if we are replacing feeds with a pump, then I would look at a high grade pump. Now, if you are producing very well and you've got a high supply, even now at this point, then sometimes we would look at like a standard pump might work for you. So any of the kind of off the shelf, a pump with a separate motor. If there is any supply issues or you're looking at doing a lot of pumping, then I'd probably look at a higher grade pump or a medical grade pump. Here in Ireland, you can definitely hire them. Medicare.ie, you've got the Ardo pump from Breast is Best, you've got breastpump.ie, and if you're abroad, there's loads of different places that you can hire a hospital grade. If you were looking at pumping and you want to do quite a bit of pumping, then a really good pump would be the Spectra. Spectras are really good. They are multi-users as well. So you can actually, they can be resold. They're closed systems and it's a high grade pump. But when you look at these pumps are like big motored pumps. And that's because the pump is highly effective. And in this situation, using a pump instead of the baby can save a mother. So particularly at nights, I would have some clients that will pump every 3 hours at night and they'll breastfeed as the baby demands during the day, but getting the mother to do a 15 to 20 minute pump. So when we look at timing on the pump, we are looking at the output. So telling a mother, you just pump every 15 minutes or pump for 15 minutes every 3 hours, both breasts, can lead some mothers that are in the upper supply limits into oversupply. So it's about output. And when you're pumping and you're doing direct breastfeeding, it's about pumping to meet the need of the infant, not pumping to excess to have a big stash in the freezer. That can lead to oversupply very quickly. And oversupply isn't always better. I know we think it's like, oh great, I've got loads of excess, but it can lead to feeding issues. It can lead to babies struggling with flow. It can lead to you being at risk of mastitis more. So it's about just meeting the need of the infant and maybe having that little bit extra, but a very small amount just to have there. So yes, you can look at electric pump. I would always find much more effective because you literally put it on and it does the work for you. Any of those manual pumps can be very effective. You're just doing the occasional pump here and there. If you're out and about, a manual pump can be very effective. The Medela manual, most people really love. of. I am not connected to any brands or anything else. I will talk about my own brand and I will let you know when I am, because obviously there's a bias there. But when we look at any of the other products, I'm not connected to any companies, so I just speak about them generically. High grade pump can be very effective. If you are feeding both breasts, then you pump both breasts in that situation. So just do like for like as such. When it comes to breastfeeding, support is crucial here. And if you're really struggling, link in with a local lactation consultant. I offer online, both worldwide and in person, depending. But it's just about kind of getting through those early days. Understanding the difference when a baby's at the breast of active feeding is something that we should be really teaching parents in the early days. I hear a lot, and even I've done 4 consults today, and I hear a lot about being timed on the breast. I do 15 minutes one side, 15 minutes the other, but actually time means nothing. Your baby could sit on the breast for 15 minutes to an hour and actually not transfer very much. Understanding that your baby is actively feeding and transferring, so hearing that lovely audible swallow, is what we want to teach parents. We can make things more effective and improve it by having a really good deep latch, good attachment. And sometimes when the baby goes on the breast, they'll do a little flutter suck, then they move into these big sucks, and that's where you'll hear an audible swallow. So you'll see maybe suck, suck, pause, and when they pause, their mouth is filling with loads of yummy milk, and you'll hear a k sound. That sound is swallowing. So they might go suck, suck. That sound is telling us they're audibly swallowing and transferring. Now, that will obviously, when the baby sucks and swallows in the early days, they trigger your letdown, which is where the baby will, the milk is naturally flowing from the breast. It's really fast generally. The baby's really happy and content. But then the letdown starts to pass, and now it's up to the baby to do the work. And when the baby's at the breast, sometimes especially in the newborn phase, they can be sleepy, they can be lethargic, especially if there's any element of jaundice. It might not need treatment, but it can lead to a baby being a bit sluggish on the breast. Breast compressions can be your best friend. So what's a breast compression? It's where you do a squeeze and a hold and watch how your baby responds. It increases the flow of milk from the breast to the baby and keeps the baby nice and active. The baby's eyes can be closed, but they'll keep sucking and swallowing once the flow is there. If your baby stops sucking, I release, move my hand over, and I'll squeeze again. Just watch when you're doing a compression that you don't pinch the breast. So you're not doing it like this. You're using your hand around, and the flat of your hand, you're doing a compression. I always squeeze, hold, watch the baby's response. Try to avoid palpate, so bouncing. So the bouncing could just move the breast, but it's ineffective. It's not really doing anything except sometimes just triggering the baby to suck. But if you want to keep the flow going, I'll do a squeeze and a hold. Watch your baby's response, suck, swallow. They stop, I'll move. I move my hands around and I'll do it again. I sometimes would use breast compressions, particularly when their milk has just transitioned in, to keep the baby nice and effective at the breast. Breast compressions can increase the make a baby more effective at the breast. They can shorten feed times. They can increase the milk amount that's transferred to the infant, and even sometimes the fat content, because we're increasing the transfer of milk and the fatty milk globules from the breast. So breast compressions can be very effective for a parent in those early days of breastfeeding. So see how you go. Choices of the pumps will always depend on the purpose of the pump. If you've got a supply issue, high grade, medical grade pump, or I would look at something like the Spectra, the Freestyle, one like that. The wearables, which a lot of parents love, for if there's a supply issue or in the very early days, they're not always as effective. Because if you look at the size of the motor, this is my brand, which I will mention, Nursing Mama, the size of the motor is much smaller than the size of the motor in a high grade hospital grade pump. So you will obviously see that the effect won't be as good or beneficial. But the wearables can be very effective down the line. So for a mom that's milk supply is well established, breastfeeding's going well, they are just pumping on the go. They want to add in a pump. They've got other little kids around. They're going out with their friends for lunch, or you're away. Then a wearable can be very effective for a lot of women. But it's important even now that you look and ensure that your flange size is correctly measured. So what's a flange size? This will be this part that it connects to the breast. So what we want is only the nipple should move up and down. If your pump or your flange is pulling in and sucking in the areola, which is the darkened part around the nipple, then it's too big. If the pump is sucking and pulling the nipple so much, but it's chafing around the edge, then it may be too small. So how do you measure? You measure your flange size by sometimes just give the nipple a little tweak, and then measure from the outside of the nipple to the other side of the nipple, and that gives you your measurement. So you might measure at, say, 17 millimeters. The outside, the diameter of the nipple is 17. Now you might measure 17 and you've tried size 17 flange and it works perfectly. For other mothers, they find it maybe chafes a little bit or it's a bit uncomfortable. So you might add 1 to 2 mils on top of it for comfort. So that comes down to, you put it on, you go, God, it's a bit tender. You might use a little bit of even coconut oil just around the edges here, and you still say, God, that's a bit sore. I'm going to try a bigger size. So then you might add 1 mil, so go size 18, or a 19 mil might suit you better. So when we talk about measuring our flange size, we measure it, and you might actually go on the exact size you measure, or we add one, so we sometimes say 1 to 3, but 1 to 2 mils on the other side, and it's for comfort so that it's effective for you, can be, is what we look at essentially. Imam, sorry if I pronounce that wrong. I've been told to wait until a few weeks to use bottles and to only focus on the breast. Thoughts? I suppose the thing is, we want, if there is no necessity to bring in a bottle or a pump, and we are trying to get baby to learn the skill and you learning the skill, then we go with breast only. But I have many clients that will actually, they're struggling so much that they actually decide, this is too much for me. I am just going to stop all this. I can't do it. And it leads to a mom finishing a breastfeeding journey way sooner. A pump can be a protector. When we pump in exchange for a feed, we will protect milk supply, and sometimes it will allow the mother to get a little bit more rest in between feeds just to get them going. When we look at bottles, the problem with the bottle is that a baby in the early days has a flow preference. So it's not about bottle versus breast and nipple confusion. What we're looking at is the flow preference. And a baby wants to feed in the easiest manner possible, which is often the bottle, because it's passive feeding. It's down to how we handle the bottle and how we give the bottle will lead to the preference of the flow. The breast is always a much slower flow than if we offer the bottle and we don't pace it. The bottle, baby will take the bottle in very quickly, and it makes it a lot more, I suppose, it leads to the baby wanting the bottle more over the breast. So it's finding that right balance. I will say, if you know in your journey that you want your baby to have a bottle at some stage of their journey, whether it's 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, you might have loads of events on and you want the bottle brought in, then I would always recommend a breastfed infant being introduced to a bottle anywhere around the 6 weeks or even 4 to 6 weeks. If there's any oral dysfunction, so if your baby has had any major issues, they've had a tongue tie, their oral function is impacted and they may be not as good, and they're struggling with the breast, and I would say 4 to 6 weeks I'd bring in a bottle. Now that doesn't mean you have to exchange a full feed for a bottle feed. You don't need to bring in formula, it can be breast milk. But what I look at is bringing it in, because a baby has a primitive suck reflex from up until about 5, 6, 7 weeks. But after that, if the baby's only been exposed to a certain way of feeding, so via the breast and nothing else, then a baby can be like, I don't want to touch that. I love this. I know how to function this. And they struggle with the bottle. I do a lot of consults nearly daily of bottle refusal, and it's probably one of my most popular consults, because parents will go with breastfeeding, and what happens is a lot of the time is a baby may have taken a bottle in the early days because of issues and weight and everything else. So the bottle was used and they went between breast and bottle, no issues. And that's what you'll find. A baby with a primitive suck reflex can often go between bottle, breast, nothing, or like both in the early days. And it kind of lulls a parent into the false sense of security, thinking, I've got this, there's no problem, when actually then the parent gets breastfeeding going, they stop the bottles and everything else, and they go hell for leather with breastfeeding, all is going well, and then the mom decides, actually I'm going to get this baby to take a bottle now because I'm heading out, and the baby's like, hell no, I don't know how to work this, so no, I'm not taking it. And it can lead to a lot of anxieties and I suppose worry that the baby won't eventually take it. There are things that we can do to encourage the baby taking the bottle. But I would say, if it is something that you want as part of your journey, then bring it in. But what I would recommend is get breastfeeding going. First few weeks, all is going really well. Then maybe around anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks, you choose yourself. What I often recommend is a parent will offer 30 mils of breast milk in the bottle before a feed. So maybe in the evening time when when our milk volumes is a little bit less, we will offer 30 mils in the bottle. It's not a full feed. It shouldn't really impact supply, but it's enough to get the baby to function and learn the function of the bottle bottle and keep it in place. So you might do it once every 2 or 3 days, and your baby will then take it, and I just never let it go. So if the baby ends up sick or you're away on holidays, I still keep that bottle in place. A baby could take a bottle every single day of their life, then they could end up sick, and a parent will say, I'll just leave it be and just let them on the breast. Or they head off on holidays and go, I'm not bringing that pump, I don't want any part of it. And then very quickly mom brings back in the bottle, they're going, hey, no, not touching it, don't know what to do with it, don't want any part. So just with caution, with a breastfed that really loves the breast, they can really struggle with knowing how to suck on the bottle if they're not exposed to it early on. So I'm never against, but I think learning the skill of breastfeeding is really important. If you are using a bottle, why you are using it, is it just 30 mils to learn the skill of it? Is it that you want to replace a full feed, then you pump and exchange, and learn how to bottle. When you're using a bottle in a breastfed, it is so important that we pace feed that bottle. So what does pace feeding mean? I'm picking any bottle, okay? So when it pace feeding means the teat does not need to be absolutely full of milk like this. This leads to a really fast flow, so there's no control over it, and babies generally will literally take a lot more milk in than required. They will take a lot of air in. It's poor control of flow, and it leads to them favoring. This is so much easier than the breast. So what we want is that the teat can have milk, and the bottle could be like this. The milk, the teat sits here. It doesn't need to be full, but let the baby draw it out and suck on it. If my baby is sucking really fast, they go I'm going to tilt it down. That means it's going to slow it down. If my baby takes a break, I'll just tilt it back and just give them a second. If they start sucking again, I'll lift it up. But that movement is very minimal. So what I see a lot of parents doing when they're doing pace feeding is I'll just grab my little baby. They will pick the baby, they'll have the baby, and they'll have the baby. This is a real traditional style where the baby could be like this, the baby's guzzling really fast, and then they keep taking it out. Then the baby cries because it's getting really agitated because you're giving them a little and then taking it away. Instead, a much easier way of doing it is if I sit my baby up, or I just put them in an upright position. I still want the chin away from the breast as if they were kind of like they were breastfeeding. I tickle the top of the lip because you just ask permission, is it okay to put the bottle in? And you go for the roof of the palate because it leads to stimulating the suck reflex, and you get as deep as possible. So even with a bottle fed baby, we want them as deep as possible on the breast. So you can see here, they're literally sealed to that bottle. Now you can see here, the baby's head is tilted, but the bottle is more horizontal. And if I notice that the baby was struggling and like it's too fast, I'll just tilt it down a little bit. If they're getting annoyed and it actually needs to be tilted up, I'll just lift it up a little bit. So this movement is minimal instead of this guzzling and taking it out. Guzzling, that's not controlling flow. The pace is still really fast, but it's agitating to the infant. So it's just being a little bit more cautious on that. So I'm not against bottles being brought in, but it depends on every situation. That's why this is very generic, and it depends on what's going on in a family situation. Laura, can I also ask about back pain? Any tips to help with breastfeeding? It's all about positioning. So just going to run through a really quick latch just for a demo purpose. So if I was going to do, I'm just going to say cross cradle. So I'm just going to show you. I always make sure that my baby's turned. So what I mean by that is my baby's two knees are touching off me. So they're turned completely sideways. Two knees, front bum, belly button, nipples. The arm here, I generally use this as nearly like a trap. If I'm doing a cross cradle, I take my hand right into the crook of the neck. So you can see it's right in the crook, but the palm of my hand is flat against the baby's kind of shoulder and back, just between it. And I want the baby to relax the head back. I hold the bum in with this arm and I let the baby kind of fall forward a little bit. I take a little bit of shaping, so I'm just going to give a little bit of shaping in the alignment of the lips. So then I'll bring the baby's chin and I wait for the baby to open. So the baby's chin touches the breast. It leads to the nipple. Can you see there? Nipple to the upper palate. And when they open, I wait. I give them a few seconds. When they open, then I hug them on. The hugging, though, just to be clear, comes from behind the head like this. Once they're on, I wait and I say, okay, are they sucking? Yeah, that's fine. Is it sore? No, it's perfectly fine. Then I take my hand nice and gently. I bring it around here. So this arm comes in around between the shoulder and the head. And then I always just lean back. So I lean back into my chair. I'll take this hand out. And if you look, my baby is completely on and I should be leaning into my chair. So the baby's weighted on me. It's in a nearly like a laid back feeding position. I just cheated by latching on in a cross cradle. And only part I should have to, this is a weighted doll. The only part I should have to hold is, and have supported, is this arm under. So like a little cushion here might help, or just lean back into a couch. You can lean back as much as you want. If the flow is really fast, I'll lean back more. If I was out and about, even in a coffee shop, I just sit to latch and then I lean back. If you can see, the chin is embedded, cheeks are touching evenly, and the nose is free. So the nose can be flush to the breast, or it can be actually It can be clearly away from it, but the nose should never be, and it should never be like this. So if the nose is like this, sometimes our hand was too high holding the infant, or they're too high starting. So if I was doing a cradle hold, I just turn my baby again like I did. I generally go with the slightly angled rather than this angle here. It just works a little bit better. I have them slightly angled, so the knees are still touching and they're in fully connected. It's not even a piece of paper can get between me and the baby. This arm stays here, and if I'm doing a cradle hold, I just bring the arm around and I let the head kind of hang over. So if you look, I'll hold in my baby, the head tilts back. So this is just if I'm going to do it this way. And I'm going to just, sometimes I'll give just a little bit of shaping with a little bit of a tilt. Still again, let the baby's chin touch. And once they open, I hug them on, I lean back, and my baby again is in the cradle. It's in a cradle hold, and they're in a laid back, and they are chin embedded, cheeks are touching, noses free. If the baby goes on, and you can see, give a little shaping, the chin comes on here, they open their mouth and they go up and on. If the baby is on evenly, you shouldn't see the corner of the lips. If your baby's hanging like this, it means they're slightly rotated when you put them on. So that would be when you have your baby, and sometimes at the early days, we have them nearly, you think they're turned in, but their actual body's looking up at the roof and the head is turned to the side. So little tweaks can make things a lot better, but we should always be leaning back. Most parents, if they're using pillows, which I'm not a big fan of, they have the baby leaning here, they've got the breast in on top and they're leaning over like this. You'll get really bad upper pain and your lower back will get very sore very quickly. Postnatally, because of all the progesterone during pregnancy allows our ligaments to loosen in order for us to give birth, but we can do back injury. We can have a back injury very easily. So be very cautious of our backs and just watch your positioning with regards to breastfeeding and bottle feeding alike. Also, is knee pain normal from breastfeeding? Nope, not. You shouldn't have knee pain unless you've done something while feeding, or you're angling. Maybe you're sitting with your legs kind of in a, what you call it, cross-legged. That might, so I wouldn't generally. We should be sitting back, leaning back nice and comfortably rather than hanging over our infants is really, really important. I'm not a big fan on using pillows, because I think having a parent learn how to feed without a pillow and latching and everything else is so much more comfy. I love to see a mom just sitting back. You don't have to be lying back, but like even like me, if I was sitting into my couch nice and comfy, I love to see a mom sitting back and being chilled out and being nice and comfy. And it's the one thing I work on all my clients with is positioning and latching, because it's probably the biggest part of when we're with breastfeeding. Mary has asked, how long does it take to successfully transition from breastfeeding to bottle feeding generally? Transitioning to pumping, bottle feeding closer to maternity leave ending. Mary, the real thing you have to think about here is your baby taking the bottle very easily, or are they like, is there any bottle refusal? If your baby has no refusal, they take the bottle well anyway, then I suppose when we're weaning and we're moving them over to bottle feeding, you drop one feed. So I generally wouldn't drop the first morning feed because our milk volume's at its highest. I wouldn't drop the bedtime feed if that's the one they really love and they head off to sleep with. I'd probably look at any of the other feeds. Maybe mid-morning is probably a good one. And you offer the bottle in exchange for a breastfeed. Now, when you drop that very first feed, you might kind of go, God, at the time you give the bottle, you might go, God, I'm really full, I have to do something. So you'll hand express a little off for comfort, but your aim is not to empty. You give the baby the bottle so it gets them to the next feed. And what will happen is then today you might take away the 10 a.m. feed. Generally for that very first feed we drop, it could take 3 to 7 days. Sometimes if supply is really high, maybe even 10 days to drop that first feed for your body to respond to the drop in demand. Now you have to remember at the very beginning, people like parents say to me, oh my God, I'll be at this for weeks, but you won't, because at the very beginning, your overall supply is at its highest. When you drop one feed, then your supply is being told to shut down. When you drop another feed, the overall supply is taking a hit again. And the more feeds you drop, then the overall supply takes a bigger hit, and it's much quicker to drop feeds as you go along. So the first might take 3 to 7 days for your body to react. So if you were due to feed at 10, you would give your baby the bottle. The next day you might find the baby's due the feed, it's just times will move, but in a range of picking the same feed time. So it might be 10:30 and you kind of go give the baby the bottle, you go, God, I'm really full. You try to push it out to the point where you go, I'm uncomfortable, I need to do something. So hand express a little off. We're still leaving milk left sitting in the breast. So we're telling supply to slow it down, but we need to do it gently. So you might get to 10:30, the next day you get to 11, the next day you get to 12, the next day you get to 12. And before you know it, you can go from maybe the 8 o'clock feed to having the bottle at 10 to the next breastfeed. And that means without any stimulation, it means your body is now adjusted. You can drop the next feed. I generally don't drop back to back breastfeeds. And offer 2 bottles back to back, pure and simply just in the early days, because it takes the supply longer to drop and it can be a bigger impact to yourself, as in you feel more uncomfortable. I would generally drop the bottle or drop the breast and give the bottle at maybe mid-morning, 10, whatever time. They breastfeed the next, and then when you're ready, drop the next feed after that. When you drop the 2 feeds either side, if you want to go back and take away the middle one, then that's fine, but your body's adjusted either side of it. So it's just a bit more pleasant for you. The baby, once they're on the bottle, they'll take anything. So a baby can move over to bottles if they take the bottle, no issue, very, very quickly. If it's more about you weaning off the breastfeeding and pump or breastfeeding, rather than the baby could move on to the bottle tomorrow and you could just wean from a pump instead, that's completely up to the parent. So it just takes a little bit of time, but I would allow in the beginning, probably if you've got a good supply, a week for the first feed to drop, then you might be able to get the next one down in 5. It really depends on each individual mother. For other mothers, they can drop them much quicker and they could be done and dusted in a week, 2 weeks, done and dusted. Others, they just do it nice and gently and they have a bit of time, so they kind of allow for 4 weeks to start weaning off and moving over to the bottle. If you are returning to work, then I suppose things to remember is that depending on the age of the baby, if your baby was over kind of 9 months plus, the baby can go without breastfeeds during the day while you're at work for up to 8 hours. They'll do it. There's 3 meals, they're solids. They'll have an open or sippy cup for water, and they'll breastfeed in the morning before you go. And once you get home, they'll breastfeed again. And the only thing with that is they sometimes increase that evening feeds, and they'll often feed maybe more overnight to compensate. It just depends. Some will, some won't, but just to be aware. Siobhan has asked, hey Katie, 2 questions, no problem. I'm a first-time mom to a 9-week-old and have been exclusively breastfeeding for the vast majority of the time. On the occasions I need to pump using Medela manual, I find it super, I feel super engorged in the days that follow. Any insight on this maybe? Secondly, I find that while I'm 9 weeks into the journey, there are still times I feel quite engorged. Baby is starting to sleep longer stretches. Could this be why? Yes, I would imagine so. The thing you have to remember as well, Siobhan, is that our milk supplies are still calibrating. And whilst some women post 6-7 weeks will find it'll all stabilize much quicker, others take a little bit more time. It is very common, even in the early first few months, that moms, if they have pushed out a feed or anything, they will feel super engorged by the time they come to it. If you are pumping if you're pumping in exchange for feeds, then you're only pumping to meet the need of the infant, not pumping in excess. So supply should be regulated. If you are pumping post a morning feed to collect milk to build a stash, that's where you need to be careful, because if you're already bordering on a high supply, you are more likely to trigger more milk to come in. So I suppose if you are a leaker and you leak a lot, then what you could do is if you feed one side, then you could try catch it with a catcher. Just a milk kind of catcher or a breast shell. So basically this is passive, it's pure and simply no suction applied. So you feed this side and you collect what you get, and you might collect 20, 30 mils, and you only do it at your feed times and you could collect quite a bit. If you are not a leaker, then I would only be very careful of maybe pumping post one morning feed and do it only every few days to collect a little bit to build a stash or to offer it back. So just be careful. It just depends on what you're doing. If your baby is starting to sleep that little bit longer, then with time supply will drop. So just supply doesn't drop immediately, it just takes a bit of time. And if your baby starts doing the same kind of spells of going 4 or 5 in the same kind of manner, then the supply will drop to meet that. Longer stretches meaning 3 by 3 hours. Yeah, and that can be a normal longer stretch for some mums. Baby's gaining very well, by the way, over 6 kgs mark at 9 weeks. Excellent, well done. Sounds like you're nailing it, Siobhan. Emma has asked, hi Katie, my 3-month-old exclusively breastfed baby is not gaining as well as hoped. Feeding every 3 hours on average, sometimes more in the evening and slightly less overnight. PHN advised to give a few more mils of breast milk per feed, or to top up with formula. Example, 2 ounces of formula at the end of breastfeeds. Have been collecting milk on the second breast with Hacka most feeds, and worried should have been putting baby on the second breast instead. In the AM, get 90 mils in the Hacka, PM 20 mils. Was using the milk for the night feeds. Do I feed off both breasts each time? Any tips on maximizing baby's feeds? It's quite a long and there's a lot in there, Emma, to be honest. I suppose things to consider is I would expect, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like if you're collecting milk, so if your baby's only feeding on one side and you are using the hacker to the other side, and then you're using that to give back to a baby in a bottle, unless you're pumping in exchange for that, then that will impact supply. So by pumping in the morning doesn't even out the stimulation, like taking away a long spell of feeds at night if your breast was started going 4 hours or 5 hours without feeds. I would always offer both breasts on every feed unless a baby dictates, I actually don't need that much. So if you're going one feeding this side on this feed and your baby goes 3 hours, roughly 2.5 to 3 hours this side, and then next feed they go 2.5 to 3 hours this side, then this breast hasn't been fed for nearly 6 hours, 5 to 6 hours. That's a very long time. That's perfectly fine if you've got a really big milk supply. We want it to come down. We don't need that much milk. But if they're talking about giving top ups, I'm going to get my baby to feed off both breasts. I would generally, if you're doing a feed on one side, move baby over. If you want to add the hack onto the other side to collect residual, then you are collecting what's left in the breast. You're not collecting in advance of baby having opportunity to go to the breast. If you're talking about topping up with formula, I'm actually going breastfeed both breasts instead of doing that. If there is any sort of they're questioning supply, I give it a little bit of a perk up, maybe bring in a pump occasionally, just post a feed to tell it just bring back up to where it was previous. If anything, sometimes it's not a supply issue. It's not about anything else. It's just your baby's going too long without a feed. So look at your timings at night and just make sure that if you're using milk from the day to give in a bottle to get them going longer at night, then that's what's probably impacting your baby's weight, and supply is probably getting hit, because unless you're pumping in exchange for that night bottle, regardless, it's gonna lead to it. So it sounds like if you've got 90 ml sitting in a breast in the morning and you're not using it, that's a really good volume. I'd be just getting baby to feed more, using both breasts more frequently. If my baby mooches, stirs, flickers an eyelid, I'm offering the breast, and that could be all that the problem is. If you use a soother, not anti-soother, soothers can be fantastic in some infants, particularly breastfeds, that just comfort on the breast. But sometimes using a soother, particularly at night, a baby will comfort on the soother and they'll be like, I love this. And it can lead to spacing out feeds way more than they naturally would without it. So if they suck a soother and then they wake and stir, I never replace the soother. I'll offer the breast first. So it really does depend. There are so many things that, could be impacting here. And this is just a generic kind of answer because I don't know the ins and outs on history. But I would look at trying to look at feed times overnight, increase the feeding times, offer both breasts on every feed, use compressions, and I think that would be enough probably to bring your baby back up unless there's issues there. So yeah, it just depends. And also look at the weights. Like sometimes we can jump in and we're kind of told there's weight issues, and it's is there or is there not? It just depends. So look at the weight gain from 2 weeks to 6 weeks. How much was gained in the 4 weeks, and break it down. Was she gaining 180 a week or more? And then from 6 weeks to the next weight check, maybe it was 3 months. Like what was the weight gain? Are they like, is the weight 160, 80, 90 a week? Just judge and see. And it might be actually okay. I don't know because I don't know the ins and outs. Spectra, Imam, sorry, I hate when I don't pronounce because people don't pronounce my surname right and it drives me cracked. Spectra didn't work for me. Mom Cozy M6 worked better. So it depends on the person. I had to switch from Spectra to Mom Cozy. There you go. And that's why, like, I would speak a lot. And when people always ask me about my pump, oh my God, I'm thinking about using your pump. What do you think? I will be really honest and say, wearables can be really effective for some because it gives the opportunity for a mom to be pumping on the go and they'll get a good output. Some moms will say to me, I get the same out of the Spectra as I do out of your pump. And I'm like, that's brilliant. But we must remember that the size of the motor on most wearables is this size. The size of the Spectra is it's way bigger. So for the majority, so be like you yourself. Some will go against the rule, will find it just as effective. Others really do need that high grade. It depends on the person. That's why I say, like, pumps are so subjective. I have a lot of people that could say, Katie, I'm using a pump and I'm not getting any output, so there must be something wrong with the pump. It might not be anything to do with the pump. It could be just that you don't have any residual volume there. So what's normal? If you fed your baby 15 mils to 60 mils is a normal residual volume for any for any post feed. So volume post feed, as people think they're going to get 3 and 4 and 5 ounces. If you pump in exchange for a feed, you might get anywhere between 2, 4 and 5 ounces. But we don't, not every mother will have these 5, 6 ounces that you see on TikTok and Instagram. So just be aware of that. Residual volume can be much lower, but your baby's getting fed first. So we only expect little bits on the other side. I am speeding up because I know this could cut out at any stage because I know we're kind of coming to the end. Katie has asked, hi, my 8-month-old is exclusively breastfeeding, is refusing the breast completely. Having to pump to keep supplies, I feel it is dropping. Well established on solids, 3 meals. Any tips for breast refusal? So like it just depends. Usually breast refusal will come maybe linked to something. Had they been sick? Had they been off? Had they been on the bottle just a little bit more? That led to the preference for the bottle versus the breast. Is supply as good as it was before? Is it that the flow is slow and now they're quite happy with the flow in the bottle? It just depends. So sometimes I'd look at maybe those sleepy feeds. So particularly at night, if they're waking or that, I get them onto the breast without them even realizing. If they're really giving out to you and they're like, hell, I'm not doing this, and you've tried the sleepy phase and all these kind of things, doing skin to skin and helping, then sometimes, like if they've gotten very used to a bottle, I might use a nipple shield on it just to see, will that encourage them to get back. Is it a breast refusal, or is it that they've just had a nursing strike, and that generally is led by something has happened, kind of, we don't know what. Like just keep offering the breast, don't push them, don't pressure them. Sometimes that sleepiness, that if just coming out of a sleep, I nearly try to get them on the breast ready to go. I nearly have my milk literally on the breast, kind of droplets, to get them going. I use breast compressions. Just watch the flow of the bottle versus the breast, because it really does just depend. So just watch the volume of solids they're taking in. Are they kind of going, oh, hey, I'm kind of so full, I'm loving my solids? Because you'll have some babies that will love solids and they'll do really well. And sometimes if we bring them up too much, it can lead to the baby dropping the feed. So there's so much going on. Again, we just have to wait and see. Siobhan, can supply change on an ongoing basis if babies' feeding habits change? Yeah, of course. Our supply is regulated around the 6-7 week mark, but if your baby drops feeds, it's going to come back down. Generally speaking, if your baby tries to increase, like bring feeds back up, it generally comes back up. For some mothers that are on the lower end of supply, and we really that's why it's really important to look at improving our milk supply production before the 6-week mark, because it's a lot more favorable and a more positive outcome in that situation. For other moms, if they're really big suppliers, then it can go up and down as the baby dictates. So sometimes they'll start dropping feeds and then they'll increase feeds, and you'll see it kind of go up and down. Some moms will really struggle. They're probably the ones in the upper supply find that, how the baby feeds will fluctuate your supply a little bit more, but it tends to settle down the longer and longer you feed, then, and the patterns become a little bit more apparent with the baby, and it generally settles that way. Nervous that feeds are dropping due to baby starting to sleep more, don't want to dry up, but also thankful for the stretches. All I can say is just keep an eye on it, Siobhan, and see. Babies will increase. Like if you start noticing babies getting fussier on day feeds or they're agitated, then I'd probably say just watch it. But other times, like my first slept 6 hours from I'd say from about 5-6 weeks, which is quite unheard of at that stage, and was a big, like, mahoos of Baba. Like he was fabulous. He was huge. I had a very big milk supply. I could have fed a few kids, I would imagine. Whereas my second was really dainty and small. And whilst I still had a really big milk supply, she fed completely different, only had little snacks throughout the day. So it really will depend. She would have definitely probably slept a lot, if not slept as well as he did, even though my supply was there. So it also depends on how the baby transfers and does at the breast. So like I would say, keep an eye on it. If baby's feeding really well and supply is maintaining, enjoy the extra sleep and just keep an eye. Sinead also has asked, hi, I have a wedding next weekend, first time leaving baby, 14 weeks old, exclusively breastfed. He normally feeds every 2 hours from one breast. Am I okay to pump every 3 hours rather than every 2? Could I potentially leave for 4? Be careful on the 4. I'd probably go 3. So I'd look at 3, and your pump is probably a little bit more, sometimes more effective, but you should be pumping to how your body feeds as well. So if you kind of go, oh God, I really feel like I'm tingling and I feel like I would normally feed my baby, I'm going to go and pump, because this is where mastitis happens quite regularly. Christmas, celebrations, christenings, weddings, because we push it out a little bit further each time. We kind of go, oh my God, I'm bursting, now I'll do it. But we're putting ourselves at risk. So just listen to your body. For some, you'll kind of get to 2.5 hours and go, okay, I'll be able to manage till 3. For others, depending on fluid volume and everything else, you might go, God, I can't wait. I need to do it now ASAP. So it very much depends on the situation. So I would say judge, but follow your body, not the clock. That's the big thing when we look at it. and also enjoy the wedding, more importantly. 9 week old favoring one breast, even if trying to trick with the rugby hold. Any tips? Happy to go on after the letdown. Thanks. So, if your baby favors one side over the other, sometimes it can be down to their positioning, and we kind of find it easier to latch on that side. Also, when we look at supplies, so sometimes we favor that side a little bit more. We find it easier, baby goes on easier, so then they'll feed more off that side. They're now increasing supply on this side. We try to get the other side, they don't do it, so they only take a little bit, then we move back. So now we're encouraging supply on this side all the time, and we're kind of telling supply, hey, shut it down, we don't need that much. So it's about balancing it out. It might mean that we need to just increase supply a little bit more on this side to make it a bit more favorable. Sometimes a baby can have tension within the body, and you'll notice that they have a side preference. So they might find that they hold the head always to this side a little bit more, and they don't really look to the other side. And that can lead to a little bit more difficulties when we're trying to latch on the other breast, and that can be part of it. So it can be down to handling, it can then be to positioning, it can be down to our supply, and it can be down to if there's tension or they do have very much a side preference, then that can also be impacting. So I would look at that as well. And just even sometimes try to even hand express a little, get the milk flow going before baby comes on, just to help them out there to see. I know we are coming to the end of this, and I'm sorry. I know I've got loads of questions in, I haven't even gotten near them, but I hope you are finding it helpful. If you keep following, there's loads of events over on the Auggie platform, and lots of tips and advice over on different subjects, and a great way of communicating with other parents. I also keep following on Instagram at nursingmama.ie, and the TikTok at Nursing Mama as well. I offer loads of Q&A sessions and lots of tips and advice, whether breastfeeding or formula feeding, combination feeding, exclusive pumping. I am here to support everyone. I do online consults worldwide, and they're very, very popular. And then I do in-person consults depending on location here in Ireland. Sinead, thanks a million. You're no problem at all. Really helpful. Emma has asked, are there certain bottles and you recommend for combination fed babies? Have bought mom medium flow for 3-month-old. If you are looking so a lot of the time we will look at mimicking the mother's flow. So we generally always start with a slow flow, so the newborn teat, and the newborn teat does not need to be increased unless the baby indicates it does. Now, if we've got a flow preference and the baby's irritable or they're refusing a bottle, then and mom is a really fast flow, then I would always go like for like with the mother. I will increase the flow of the teat. For other moms, that if you're bringing a bottle in from earlier on, then I would use a slow flow teat, and it might never need to be increased. They might stay in a newborn teat all the way through to a year old, until you get rid of the bottles and move on to just the open cup. So it very much depends. If there is any oral restriction or like tongue tie and they're really struggling, then I would always look at a narrow base, longer teat is much more favorable, because you can get it much more deeper into the baby's mouth. There should be no clicking on a bottle, and they shouldn't be leaking from the bottle. So you want them sealed as deep as you can get on any bottle teat that you are using. If you've bought them, then try them. If there's any issues, then I would probably look at the Dr. Brown's, the narrow base, longer teat. If you have bottle refusal, then I would probably look at more triangular shape. So it may be a little bit wider, but if you can see, it's a graduated slope, and this can be more favorable to a breastfed infant. If they're struggling with a bottle, I would always go with this kind of style of a wider base, a gradual slope. And you may find it a lot easier when it comes to it. So if you've bought mom, like if somebody's bringing in the bottle from the very beginning, then use whatever you have. Just watch the flow, keep it nice and slow, and watch the pace of it. If you are down the line and you've got irritation, agitation, struggling with the bottle refusal, then I'll probably go with the graduated slope. If you've got a baby from the beginning, whether breast or bottle fed, and they were really struggling and they do have a tongue tie, or maybe they've had it released and still struggling, then I'd probably look at the Dr. Brown's. The narrow base, longer teat can be much more favorable for their ability. Thanks, Katie. So helpful and such a great talk. Delighted. Okay, guys, I think we'll leave it there. I know that it was kind of took me a while to get through all the questions, but I hope you found it helpful. I'm sorry to all the questions I didn't get through that had come in privately into my Instagram, but you never know, I'll probably be doing one of these again. I wish you all the best. Check out Auggie.com. It has great resources there and lots of tips and advice from other clinicians. And make sure you follow me over on Instagram and TikTok and all my socials. And if you need any help, you know where I am. Okay, thanks a million. Bye, guys.